After a full day of annoyingly drip feeding clips, Sony has finally released the full trailer for Spider Man Brand New Day. And yeah, this thing is pulling from some of the weirdest Spider Man comics Marvel's ever done. We're talking Cocoon Rebirth, organic webs, possible Spider-Totem stuff, and Mary Jane's hated husband, things the comics themselves barely knew what to do with. So I went frame by frame. Here's everything in the Spider Man Brand New Day trailer. And to start, a sort of spoiler alert. In this video, I bring in information from Marvel's comic books as well as things from the trailer, but I'm going to avoid any leaks, any rumors. So if you don't want to know what any of this means, you don't want to know any of the comic references that could be surprises in the film, go ahead and hit stop now. All right, so let's start with the title Brand New Day. What does that mean? Where does it come from? Well, if you read the Marvel comics back from 2001 to 2010, just skip this chapter of the video. I put chapter markers down there so those familiar with and maybe tired of all the talk about One More Day, Brand New Day, Mephisto, Joel Quesada, you could just skip on ahead. And if those names mean nothing to you, you're in the right place. I'm going to give you all the backstory now. So the title Brand New Day is an overt reference to the Spider-Man comics run from 2008 to 2010. That was called Brand New Day. It's a somewhat controversial, but it seems in hindsight mostly beloved run of comics that had a rotating roster of writers and artists, including Dan Slott and Bob Gale. But what was more controversial was it was coming in the shadow of the story arc One More Day, which marked the end of Babylon 5 creator J. Michael Straczynski's 6-year run as author of Amazing Spider-Man. During those years, Straczynski tried to revitalize Marvel's iconic character for the 21st century and made some controversial changes that seem to be directly referenced in this Brand New Day movie trailer. Those changes included making Spider-Man more spidery, having him die and be reborn from a cocoon, and giving him organic web shooting ability, as we saw in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, as opposed to the mechanical web shooters Spider-Man's had for 40 years before that, and saying that Peter Parker was the latest in a long line of Spider-Totems. Basically, his powers didn't just come from a radioactive spider, but a mystical connection to other spider people. And the ramifications of what Straczynski wrote are still being felt to this day in all of the various Spider Island comics and things. The biggest change of all, as part of Spider-Man's role in the Civil War comics arc, Spider-Man took his identity public for the first time. No more secret identity. No more selling selfies to the Daily Bugle for cash.
They're crap. 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 Mega crap.
Spider-Man had to grow up, become a high school science teacher, and become more of a mentor and role model to his students. But as Straczynski's tenure started to come to a close, Marvel editor-in-chief Joe Quesada wanted to roll back these changes and bring Peter Parker back to his more iconic status. His identity secret, webs coming from metal cartridges like whippets, and biggest of all, younger seeming. Quesada notably hated that a character he stated should never have left high school became an adult, and instead of being a born loser with girl troubles, Peter Parker was a solid superhero with a supermodel wife, a real far cry from the nerd Stan Lee envisioned in the 60s. Worse, Quesada felt that Spider-Man's marriage was just an 80s publicity stunt that, since Spider-Man was getting married in the daily comic strip, Stan Lee thought he should get married in the comics also, and in Shea Stadium, and Quesada thought that the character shouldn't be forever bound by Lee's snap decision. But Marvel isn't DC. They don't do Flashpoint or Crisis on Infinite Earths reboots. So undoing a 30-year-old marriage was kind of harder to explain away. And they tried, oh did they try. They tried killing Mary Jane in an airplane explosion. They tried having Mary Jane and Peter separated. But Quesada felt a divorced Spider-Man, or God, a widowed Spider-Man, felt even older than a married Spider-Man. So enter One More Day, Straczynski's final arc of his run, although he did ask for his name to be removed from it because he didn't like what was done, but his name stays on as a co-writer. because this arc was intended to undo almost everything about Spider Man since his wedding in 1987. It's not just that Spider Man's changes were rolled back, but how they were rolled back that was controversial about One More Day. In that arc, Aunt May is dying again, and to save May's life, Mary Jane makes a literal deal with the devil, Mephisto. For reasons that don't totally make sense, except angry fans who say Mephisto is a mouthpiece for Quesada himself, Mephisto wants Spider Man and Mary Jane's wedding undone. Not divorced, not annulled, it never happened. Mary Jane agrees, Mephisto saves Aunt May's life, and Spider Man now lives in a brand new day where his identity is a secret, his new Spider-Totem powers are gone, and he and Mary Jane were never married. That Spider Man became his old self has worked out for the character, but even now, almost 20 years later, fans still blanch at how Quesada forced a devil's deal to reset Spider Man to an old status quo. But if that sounds familiar, even if you never read the comics, at the end of Spider Man No Way Home, a similar spell was cast. No Mephisto, but Doctor Strange made Spider Man's identity secret again, his relationship with Mary Jane ended, and Spider Man now has to continue into the movie Brand New Day. So Sony and Marvel picking that title, not subtle. But what does that mean for the upcoming film? What does the trailer indicate? Well, my first time watching the trailer, I just have to say my first impression was how great the film's camera work looks. I think John Watts created an interesting Spider-Man trilogy, but only No Way Home felt like a truly great film, and overall, his Spider-Man entries lacked the visual flash of Sam Raimi or even Mark Webb. For Brand New Day, director Destin Daniel Cretton is behind the camera. He was the director of the Shang-Chi film, which had a great visual style, and I think that visual appeal is amply upped for Brand New Day. From Spider-Man sitting upside down, cyber-stalking Ned and MJ, to the ripples in his suit as he plunges from great heights, I was instantly struck that this is going to be a well-shot film. The muted colors as Peter visits Aunt May's grave signal the emotional scenes will have more weight, and the shot of Spider-Man swinging with his knee bent and the shot of him versus the ninjas all feel perfect just for comic book splash pages. And they literally recreate one classic comic book cover. You can't miss the shot in the trailer where Spider-Man is carrying a guy under his arm. This is a direct lift from Steve Ditko's art in Amazing Fantasy 15, which comic geeks know is Spider-Man's first comic appearance, though in updating for 2020's fashion, the guy's suit is a little less green. All that said, maybe not all the visual effects are finished. A few of the FX shots look more like what I'd expect from the next Spider-Man tie-in video game rather than an IMAX event. As for the plot, it seems like a big part of the story is going to be about Peter Parker changing physically, and there's a couple variations on that. The first thing I noticed is that Tom Holland has visibly aged. I mean, Holland was 18 when he signed on to be Marvel Cinematic Universe's Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, and it's been 5 long years since his last turn in No Way Home. And for the 7 films in that time where Holland played the character, the star's boyish looks kept him feeling more like a Spider-Boy that his character was, a high schooler always under someone's mentorship, than a Spider-Man. Now 29, Holland looks grown up. There's some wrinkles on his face, he looks more serious, and all this works well for the character entering the next stage of his life as shown in the trailer. That said, that I think the character is supposed to be maybe 19 in this film. I mean, according to the MCU timeline, Captain America Civil War was May 2016. Peter Parker was 15 in that. Infinity War was in 2018. And then Peter Parker was snapped away for 5 years, returning to existence in 2023. Far From Home and No Way Home are both 2024. So Peter would be 18. If Parker's a college student in Brand New Day, he'd be at most early 20s, and Holland looks far more mature than that. But in addition to age, Peter Parker seems to be undergoing another metamorphosis. There's a shot of Peter coming out what looks like a cocoon. Now, that's not random. In the comics, during Straczynski's storyline called The Other, Peter literally dies, wraps himself in a cocoon, and comes back different, stronger, stranger, more spider than man. Now look at the trailer. After emerging from that cocoon, Peter seems to have organic web shooters as he tries to shoot a web from his hands with no web shooters attached. And then when he falls, it seems he succeeds in doing just that. Then the sclera of his eyes seem to turn a black silver. We have Keith David's voiceover narration talking about a spider having 3 life cycles.
Spiders have 3 life cycles. When between cycles, it can leave the spider vulnerable to threats. And for those spiders who make it through, it amounts to a kind of rebirth.
Is our hero turning more into a man spider than a Spider-Man? He also has a heightened sense of hearing, so a dripping faucet makes him clutch his head in agony, just like Carlos in Freddy's Dead, but that can't be an intentional reference, right?
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
But in Civil War, Holland's character mentioned needing a mask to stop the sensory overload his spider powers gave him, a character trait not even hinted at since that 2016 movie. So if this isn't just new movie, new suit, if they're actually pulling from the other storyline, we're not just getting a new chapter. We're getting a new version of Spider-Man we've never seen on screen before. Still, making such radical changes to Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe seems bold and unnecessary. They already explained him having web shooters. We even see a close-up of them in this trailer. Why switch to organic now? Maybe better for the environment? But when we see this in the trailer, the score does harken back to that original 1960s theme song.
What is happening to me?
So, something old, something new, but God help me, if he turns into Nephilia, the creature of my childhood nightmares from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, I am out. Now, we also have Mark Ruffalo back, and I think that's going to be a key to Spider-Man's transformation. As part of Sony's deal with Disney, each Spider-Man film in the MCU gets to borrow some characters from Marvel's roster. We had Iron Man in Homecoming, Nick Fury in Far From Home, and finally Doctor Strange in No Way Home. This film brings in Bruce Banner, played again by Mark Ruffalo, and since Endgame, we've only seen Ruffalo as Hulk, really in She-Hulk Attorney at Law, if you don't count the What If cartoon series. And we see he still has a device on his arm from the injuries he sustained snapping the Infinity Gauntlet during Endgame, and he's teaching Peter a class in lattice quantum chromodynamics, or lattice QCD, but I don't need to tell you that. It's well-established non-perturbative approach to solving the quantum chromodynamics theory of quarks and gluons, which has helped measure the mass of a proton with an error of less than 2%. Will this be on the test? Or part of Parker's DNA? So now I wonder, is Peter's transformation mystical, like in the comics, or is it biological? The latter would seem to fit better with the more science-based MCU films, but hey, if Spider-Verse can be a huge hit, then maybe audiences are ready for a full magic spider destiny plot. If I were in Vegas, I'd put all my chips on Banner turning into the Hulk at some point in the movie, and perhaps even fighting Spider-Man, a classic comic book clash since Amazing Spider-Man 14 and one of my favorites as a kid. What I wouldn't bet on, as much as I'd like to see it, is a full DNA merge and Spider-Hulk be the result. But that might be too fantastical for what's looking like another street-level Spider-Man movie. There's no multiverse chaos this time around. Spider-Man is fighting on messy, violent New York City streets. And that's where the Punisher from the Netflix Defenders arc comes in. This is our first time getting Punisher and Spider-Man together in live action, and the Punisher's 4th big screen adaptation, but we're going to forget all the Dolph Lundgren stuff, right? I mean, this Spider-Man Punisher team-up feels very overdue, given that before he was a beloved anti-hero, Punisher was an antagonist out to hunt Spider-Man, his first appearance being in Amazing Spider-Man 129 back in my birth year of 1974. Here we see him hunting Spider-Man again, and the question is, why? Clearly, Spider-Man knows the Punisher. He calls him Frank and seems shocked that the Punisher is running him down with a van. And there's no sign of J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson around. Spider-Man seems to be everyone's hero. He's given the key to the city. The old lady seems relieved to see him when he rescues her. Clearly, something has happened. Now, maybe, like Spider-Man 3, this new man-spider is doing things he doesn't know about when in spider mode. Hard to say, but I'm very happy to see these two characters finally meet on screen after 52 years of fights in comics and cartoons. Speaking of the key to the city scene, though, is that Sheila Rivera giving Spider-Man the key? Sheila Rivera is the assistant to Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin in Daredevil Born Again. Of course, Kingpin outlawed vigilantes in Born Again, so why would Rivera be giving Spider-Man the key? Surely Punisher isn't going after Spider-Man for breaking a law Fisk put in place given their history. Plus, that would be ironic, a vigilante going after a vigilante about a vigilante law. Now, could Wilson Fisk himself show up in Brand New Day? Vincent D'Onofrio kiboshed that idea in a recent podcast interview, saying Marvel only has the rights to Kingpin for television projects, not film. I don't know if that makes sense, because Kingpin's primarily a Daredevil and Spider-Man villain, and Daredevil is back with Marvel, and even if Sony owned Kingpin as part of their Spider-Man roster, clearly Sony could use him on the big screen, even if he couldn't show up in Shang-Chi 2. And if Sheila Rivera is here, Fisk seems likely, as does Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock. Now, he's not been announced for this film, but late last fall, he canceled a convention appearance where I wanted his autograph, as he needed to film something. And that was around the same time John Bernthal was filming for Brand New Day. Plus, he had a cameo in No Way Home, so he's already been introduced as part of this MCU, Spider-Sonyverse. And where there's hand ninjas, there's usually a Daredevil and Elektra around. But seriously, how many people from the Defenders do we need to stuff into one Spider-Man film? Is Finn Jones really that hard up for work? And anyway, this trailer is packed with people for Spider-Man to fight. First, continuing the likelihood of Daredevil showing up, is a bevy of hand ninjas. And finally, they have the budget to be some seriously kick-ass ninja assassins. Sorry, Jennifer Garner. But there seems to be a lead ninja with a special outfit during one fight. Now, who that is, I don't have a guess. But the Hand are always goons for some leader, but who? And while we're bringing in the Netflix stuff, is their destruction and the Defenders not canon? Did just some survive? Bringing in these Netflix characters is messy. It's really starting to feel like they may have put Spider-Man in their Daredevil movie, not the other way around. Next, we have Scorpion finally paying off the Michael Mando setup from the end of Homecoming, and he's got the mechanical tail. Looks legit. He's probably not a main villain, probably just an opening fight maybe, but long overdue. Then there's Tarantula. Blink in the trailer and you'll miss this lesser-known Spider-Man foe, and by lesser known, I mean he's not Doc Ock, Venom, Lizard, or Electro, but with the blades on his feet, it's interesting to see this spider villain. But I do wonder what this portends. There have been at least 6 Marvel characters using the name Tarantula. But initially, when, like Punisher, Tarantula was introduced in 1974, he was a South American revolutionary. He was a terrorist turned government operative against the people, but he sees himself as a patriot. Given the state of the world today, would Sony dare touch on international political topics with this character? Probably not. What's more likely is Tarantula may be undergoing a metamorphosis like Spider-Man is. Several versions of the Tarantula comic book character have been mutated into various types of man-spider creatures, and maybe he's here to show us what could happen to Tom Holland's character as the mutation progresses. Perhaps Banner's DNA TSA machine? Because that's got to be what that is, right? I mean, they're scanning his DNA for something, but maybe that machine is going to stop Peter from becoming what we see Tarantula become. Or Maybe he's just one of many people Spider-Man fights in an opening montage. Could go either way, but no doubt Tarantula looks cool, as does Boomerang, in a shot where I almost didn't see him because Spider-Man is in such a classic and glorious comic pose. Under him is silly Australian bad guy Boomerang, not to be confused with DC Comics' Captain Boomerang. In some comics, Boomerang, real named Fred Myers, was Peter Parker's roommate. Peter Parker has a tendency of rooming with enemies, Boomerang, Harry Osborn. I'm sure there's at least one other one I'm forgetting. Also in the film is the Department of Damage Control. Now, in No Way Home, we saw Damage Control was the unit interrogating Peter and his friends when his secret identity was revealed. Given that Spider-Man seems to be regarded as a hero in this film, and we see the director of Damage Control even debriefing Spider-Man on the villain, it seems far more likely that Damage Control is on his side. As for that director of Damage Control, this is Bill Metzger, played by Severance star Trammell Tillman. Bill Metzger himself is a bit of a comic bad guy. In the X-Men comics, not the Spider-Man comics, I mean, he's a really minor character that only appeared in 1999's Children of the Atom X-Men comics, but he's an anti-mutant activist that runs a small press. Probably these days he'd be posting on 4chan or doing YouTube videos. But if he's against a threat, could mutants be involved? I mean, none of this answers the real question, who is Brand New Day's big bad? We hear Bill Metzger say,
"We are faced with a danger that we can't control. One we can't even see."
And we see an old lady driving a tank and then a bunch of damage control troops seeming to change. This screams mind control to me. But who's doing it? We see a hooded figure from behind. Then we get shots of someone who looks like a young woman or a young person restrained in a chair in a very controlled, monitored environment in a plastic cell, kind of like what Magneto was kept in X-Men 2. What is all this, and how does it tie to what's happening with Peter? Well, the answer probably lies in whoever Sadie Sink is playing. The Stranger Things star is in the movie and was heard in an early leaked version of this trailer, but isn't seen, at least not in the face, in this final release trailer, and that means Sony's hiding her for a reason. Now, I've read dozens of theories online as to who Sadie Sink could be playing, from a redheaded Mary Jane, but a second MJ, that seems unlikely, or female Punisher Rachel Cole, who was a redhead, or Screwball, who's the most evil of all supervillains, a social media influencer. No, I'm not kidding. But when I boil it down, it seems there are really two clean possibilities. One, she's tied to the Spider-Totem mythology, something connected to what Peter's becoming. Maybe that means Shathra, a wasp goddess from Straczynski's run in the comics. That character has ties to Spider-Man's mentor, sort of his Obi-Wan Kenobi, teaching his new spider powers in Straczynski's arc, Ezekiel Sims. Or two, all right, I can't say much about my second guess without getting into leaks and real-life spoiler territory and casting rumors, but whoever is locked down in that chair is wearing green, has feminine hands. If you can read my mind or tie up threads together in this video, you know who I think this is. And no, I'm not thinking it's X-Men's Rogue. That's just a woman with fashionable hair on the bus, not an X-Man. Or maybe I'm wrong. Also in the trailer is the unmistakable sonorous voice of veteran actor Keith David. Now, if Sadie Sink is Shathra, could Ezekiel Sims be played or at least voiced by David? In the trailer, David is talking about the 3 life cycles of spiders. That sort of instructional, informational role could be something Sims would do. And if they're pulling from Straczynski's stories, that would be a logical character. Or maybe Morlun, the spider enemy from that run who traverses realities killing spider people. David's voice seems right for that near immortal enemy. I don't know, maybe David's going to be classic comic enemy and spider slayer Spencer Smythe. He also turned into a little bit of a spider creature and is pretty classic from the animated series. Which makes me wonder, will Keith David be live action or maybe just a deep voice of a CGI creation? We know Tombstone is in this film, being played by rapper Crondon, who did the voice of Tombstone in the Into the Spider-Verse movie. Is Crondon just doing the voice for a CG Tombstone? Or is the Spider-Verse spilling into Brand New Day with Crondon doing both roles? No matter who David is playing, I can't wait to see him on screen again. Of course, it's possible they just got David to do some voiceover for the trailer since Don LaFontaine died in 2008. And yet, this movie has a Hulk. I can't imagine any of those Spider-Man enemies being one that can go toe-to-toe with a Hulk. And how will they explain Banner not helping Spider-Man out during what's sure to be a life or death stakes giant comic book movie climax? But if Hulk is there, who can take him on? Unless he's being mind-controlled as the bad guy, but didn't we just have that evil Hulk movie last year with Captain America 4? But all of that focuses on Spider-Man. What about the man under the mask? What about Peter Parker? It seems Peter's life still sucks. We do see he still misses his best friend Ned and girlfriend MJ. And guys, cyberstalking your ex's profile is not the best way to get past her. But he also seems to be crashing a party at their campus, or maybe he's a fellow student at MIT. But we get MJ making a nice, subtle, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man joke.
I'm MJ.
I'm just a neighbor from across the hall.
Friendly neighbor.
But MJ has moved on with an unnamed character played by Iman Esfandi. Now, Parker's romantic rivals often have a history of also becoming villainous. It happened twice in Spider-Man 3 with both Harry Osborn and Eddie Brock trying to woo Peter's girls and then trying to kill Peter. It happens more than twice in the comics. But Esfandi is a newer actor whose biggest role to date seems to be Ezra in the Ahsoka TV series. Would he make a compelling big bad? Unlikely. Another option is he could be perhaps the person second most hated by Spider-Man comic fans, the first being Joe Quesada for the reasons I went into earlier, but the second most hated would be comic character Paul Rabin. See, after Brand New Day started, Mary Jane was still part of the comics, and the will they or won't they with her ex-fiancé Peter Parker, there was a lot of hinting maybe they could become a couple again. Then came Paul. In 2022, to put a kibosh on any Peter Parker-Mary Jane romance, writer Zeb Wells gave us Paul. While Peter Parker was in a separate reality, it's comics, it happens. Paul and Mary Jane got married and adopted 2 kids. Paul also happened to be the son of a bad guy known as the Emissary, but then Mary Jane became Venom for a while and Paul couldn't deal, so he and Mary Jane broke up, and I don't know what happened to the kids, but that's the whole story of Peter, Paul, and Mary Jane. Still, it seems likely that any man kissing MJ in Brand New Day will deserve to be punched in the face at some point in the movie. So with all that, we've got a lonelier Peter, a more dangerous city, and a body that might be changing without his control. This is not your average friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So if this trailer's telling the truth, and I wouldn't be surprised if some scenes were digitally altered and characters removed, Marvel does that, this isn't going to be just another sequel. This is Marvel messing with what Spider-Man is. Not just his life, but his biology, his identity. This could be the boldest Spider-Man movie they've ever made. Or it could be ones that, like One More Day, fans argue about for the next 20 years. Either way, I'm in. So we at Now Playing will be reviewing Spider-Man Brand New Day this summer. And as you wait for that review, you can hear reviews of every Spider-Man movie, including the television movies, the Into the Spider-Verse movies, the Sam Raimi movies, the Mark Webb movies, and the MCU films at our website, nowplayingpodcast.com, where we have reviewed every movie based on a Marvel Comics property, including, yes, all 3 previous Punisher films, Man-Thing. Did you know there was a Man-Thing film? There was a Man-Thing film. It even co-stars Rachel Taylor from the Defender series and Transformer films. Plus, we've reviewed every DC Comics film, including the weird ones like Road to Perdition and A History of Violence and whatever that 70s TV special was, League of Super Friends or whatever. So you can find all of that, over 1,600 movie reviews at nowplayingpodcast.com. Thanks for watching this video. As everybody on YouTube has to say by law, if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Because remember, with great podcasts come great responsibility.